I met my former fiancée, whom I'll call Jane, 7 years ago in a quiet coffee shop. It was an ordinary day, yet fate had something extraordinary in store. As I stood in line behind her, a simple conversation turned into an instant connection. We shared coffee that morning, lost in conversation for nearly an hour, and before we parted ways, we exchanged numbers. Neither of us could have predicted how deeply entwined our lives would become. At the time, I was an analyst at a major investment bank, consumed by a demanding workload that left little room for personal life. My hours fluctuated between 70 to 80 hours on a good week and could soar past 120 during peak transaction periods. I had heard countless cautionary tales from colleagues, stories of love lost to grueling schedules, of partners feeling neglected, and relationships unraveling under the strain. I was wary of repeating their mistakes, reluctant to open my heart only to have it tested by the relentless demands of my career. Yet, Jane was different. From the start, she assured me that love, when nurtured with dedication and understanding, could weather any storm. We embarked on a journey together, navigating monumental highs and heartbreaking lows, but through it all, she remained my constant. She never once resented my long hours or the sacrifices my career required. Instead, she showered me with love, patience, and unwavering support. She never made me feel guilty for the time I couldn't give her. Rather, she celebrated the moments we did share, always grateful for our connection. As the years passed, our bond deepened. When I reached the 3-year mark in my career, I began contemplating a shift to private equity, a move that promised not only financial prosperity, but a more balanced life. With this change on the horizon, I knew with certainty that I wanted to spend my life with Jane. She had been my rock through the most grueling years of my junior banking career, never wavering in her love or belief in us. But life has a way of surprising us in ways we least expect. For years ago, our love story took a devastating turn. I discovered Jane had been unfaithful. The betrayal shattered me. Everything I had built, everything I had believed in, came crashing down. The pain was overwhelming, and for a time, I felt lost in the wreckage of our relationship. But here's what I want anyone who has endured heartbreak to know. Your world does not end in betrayal. The pain, though immense, is not the end of your story. I rose from the ashes of that heartbreak stronger than I ever imagined possible. Though that chapter of my life is long since closed, I share it now to offer hope to those still reeling from the wounds of betrayal. There is life after heartbreak. There are brighter days ahead. You are not defined by the pain someone else inflicted upon you. You are defined by how you rise from it. During a vacation in Spain, I made one of the most heartfelt decisions of my life. I bought a ring and proposed to Jane, believing that our love had weathered enough storms to stand the test of time. Her joyful acceptance felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with promise and unwavering commitment. But life, as it often does, had other plans. One evening, Jane left her phone on the bedside table while she stepped into the bathroom. I had never been the jealous or suspicious type, and I had no real reason to doubt her loyalty. Yet, for a fleeting moment, the thought of looking through her messages crossed my mind. I hesitated, dismissing it as an unnecessary breach of trust. But before I could push the idea away completely, curiosity got the better of me. What I found shattered me. A name I didn't recognize appeared frequently in her conversations. With a sinking feeling in my chest, I clicked on one of the messages. My worst fears unfolded before my eyes. Flirty exchanges, intimate confessions, even explicit photos. And then, the final dagger to my heart, a cruel comparison between me and this other man. They had exchanged messages about my body, about my very essence as a partner, reducing me to something to be measured and mocked. I felt the air leave my lungs. The walls around me seemed to close in, and I could barely hold the phone steady. My hands trembled as my heart pounded violently against my ribs. 1,000 thoughts flooded my mind all at once. Was this my fault? Had I been so consumed by work that she had sought affection elsewhere? Did she ever truly love me? Or had I just been a placeholder until someone better came along? I walked out into the night, needing space to breathe, to think. The city lights blurred before my eyes as I fought the overwhelming tide of emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand an explanation. But another part, the part still clinging to the love I had for her, hesitated. I was terrified that facing the truth would destroy whatever illusion of happiness I had left. Doubt gnawed at me. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe it was just meaningless messages, a lapse in judgment. But deep down, I knew better. I needed certainty. The next morning, before leaving for work, I placed a hidden camera among some items on a shelf in our bedroom. That night, at precisely 10 p.m., I sat down and pressed play. What I saw left no room for doubt. There, in the very space we had once shared as lovers, she was intimate with the man from her messages. It was undeniable, and with it, any remaining hope of reconciliation, any lingering love I had for her, disintegrated. I felt physically sick, my stomach twisting in knots as I struggled to process the betrayal. Desperate for solace, I went straight to my closest friend, Owen. The moment I saw him, the dam broke. I collapsed into tears, letting out the pain I had been holding inside. He listened, offering the quiet strength I so desperately needed. And when I finally found the words to speak, we discussed what came next. Owen suggested a plan, one that would allow me to walk away with dignity, without the emotional chaos of a confrontation. I would continue acting as if nothing had changed, remain courteous to Jane, and silently make preparations. I would secure my position in private equity, find a new apartment, and when the time was right, I would vanish from her life completely. No goodbyes, no explanations, just an empty space where I once was. The idea of disappearing, of erasing myself from her world as effortlessly as she had shattered mine, gave me a sense of control in a situation where I felt utterly powerless. I agreed. The following month was grueling. Every morning, I woke up beside her, forcing myself to act normal. Every conversation, every shared meal, every stolen kiss felt like a lie. But I played my part flawlessly, biding my time, knowing that soon I would be free. And then, when the moment came, when I had secured my job and found a new place, I left. While she was at work, I packed my belongings and walked out of the home we had built together, leaving behind nothing but silence. I blocked her number, erased all traces of our life together, and disappeared. The weight that had been crushing me for so long was finally lifted. I was free, and for the first time in years, I could breathe again. By January, maintaining eye contact with Jane became nearly impossible. Without feeling a storm of emotions I struggled to contain. The weight of betrayal sat heavy on my chest, and though I never acted on my darker impulses, I had to fight back the urge to lash out. Despite everything, I kept up the facade of a devoted fiancé, going through the motions of love and companionship. We even attended couples therapy, a charade that left me feeling repulsed and vulnerable. She had spread the news of our engagement far and wide, and when wedding planning came up, I played along, fabricating excuses about work keeping me too busy. Friends and family called to offer congratulations, oblivious to the truth lurking beneath the surface. At night, as I sat alone in my office long after my colleagues had gone home, I knew she was likely with someone else. Yet, I endured. I spent my nights working late or wandering the city aimlessly, dreading the moment I would have to return home. To distract myself, I began reaching out to headhunters in New York, searching for opportunities in private equity. The transition from investment banking to private equity was a significant milestone, and securing a role in that world required rigorous preparation. I threw myself into LBO modeling exams, my mind divided between revenge and ambition. I shared my plans with my closest friends, who stood firmly by my side. In a matter of weeks, I had lined up interviews with some of the top firms in New York. Just when I thought my escape was within reach, life took an unexpected turn. One Friday evening, I went out with Owen and another friend, Antoine. Through him, we met a group of new people, including an exceptionally beautiful woman named Alyssa. She was from Sweden, strikingly similar in appearance to Elsa Hosk, and radiated an effortless charm. We connected instantly, finding common ground in our love for deep conversations and intellectual pursuits. She was pursuing her master's degree, and as we spoke, her views on love and fidelity reassured me in ways I hadn't expected. She was unwavering in her belief that trust was sacred, that betrayal was inexcusable. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of something new, hope. Some might argue that by moving on with Alyssa before officially ending things with Jane, I was sinking to her level. But I disagreed. Jane had shattered our vows first. My loyalty to her had died the moment I watched that footage. My heart belonged to me again, and I had every right to find happiness elsewhere. After numerous interviews, I was offered a position at a prestigious private equity firm in New York. However, when I expressed interest in their London office, the managing director connected me with his counterpart overseas. 2 successful interviews later, I received an offer in London, an opportunity too good to pass up. My escape was no longer just a dream. It was reality. To celebrate, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment with Owen, Antoine, and a few close friends. Alyssa joined us, arriving last. When she walked in, she wrapped her arms around me, kissed me softly, and told me how proud she was of me. I closed my eyes, holding her a moment longer, savoring the warmth of her touch. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, truly valued. The evening was filled with laughter and light-hearted conversation. But then at 1 a.m., the door opened. Jane had come home. Everyone at the table knew precisely what was happening, yet none of us acknowledged her presence. Alyssa's hand rested comfortably on my shoulder, and she made no move to pull away. We continued our conversation as if Jane were invisible, as if her return was nothing more than a passing moment in the background. Jane stood frozen in the doorway, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She glanced between Alyssa and me, searching for some sign of hesitation, some indication that she still held power over me. But there was nothing. She lingered, visibly distressed, but no one offered her a second glance. Eventually, our guest decided to leave. As I walked them to the door, I slipped on my shoes. Jane, her voice laced with desperation, asked, "Where are you going?" "I'll be back in a minute," I said, closing the door before she could respond. By the time I woke up at 8 a.m., Alyssa was still asleep beside me, her peaceful expression a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. I kissed her forehead before heading home, ready to put the final phase of my plan into motion. When I arrived, Jane was sitting on the kitchen island, her eyes swollen and red from crying. Once, the sight of her in pain would have shattered me. I would have done anything to comfort her, to make things right. But now, I felt nothing. She looked at me with quiet desperation. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Even pity aside, I had no desire to offer her comfort. I fell asleep in the car. I lied effortlessly. I moved past her, heading for the shower. The final step of my escape was in motion. I needed to leave, but to ensure a clean break, I had to make sure she wouldn't be home when I did. Emerging from the bathroom, dressed in my suit, I approached her. I placed a hand on her face, looking into her eyes with a false tenderness. "I have to go to work now," I murmured. "I'll be home early tonight, and we'll talk then, okay?" I pressed a lingering kiss to her forehead, the last one I would ever give her. She nodded, hope flickering in her gaze. Hope I would soon extinguish. That afternoon, with the help of Owen and Antoine, I packed the last of my belongings. The lease was in my name, and although 2 months remained, I had no intention of returning. The cost of rent was a small price to pay for the satisfaction of leaving Jane behind, watching her world unravel as mine flourished. As I settled into my new apartment, I felt lighter. I dove into my new job, trained harder at boxing, and, for the first time in years, slept peacefully through the night. My friends noticed a change in me, how I seemed happier, stronger, and Alyssa and I grew closer, and before long, we were officially together. She had recently landed a remarkable opportunity at a top private equity firm, an achievement that only deepened my admiration for her. My life was no longer tainted by betrayal. I had moved beyond it, into a future far brighter than I had ever imagined. Meanwhile, Jane struggled. My absence weighed on her more than she had anticipated. She reached out to my friends, desperate for answers, but I had blocked her on every platform. She still had the engagement ring, but I had no interest in reclaiming it. She and her lover were welcome to each other. After all, trash tends to accumulate in the same place. One day, she showed up at my office, her face twisted with rage. She stormed to my desk, shouting expletives, swinging wildly at me. I sidestepped her effortlessly, unmoved by her fury. My colleagues rushed to intervene as she broke down, sobbing. "Why did you leave?" she cried. "I still love you. Why did you disappear?" I retrieved my phone and played the footage of her betrayal, holding it up for her to see. The moment she realized what I was showing her, the shame, the fear in her eyes, was one I would never forget. Her excuses and justifications were meaningless. Security escorted her out, and I turned back to my work unaffected. Jane had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. As for me, life was incredible. I had recently been promoted to vice president at my firm, with ambitions of becoming a partner before I turned 40. And Alyssa, my beautiful, kind, and loyal Alyssa, was now my fiancée. Last summer, she tearfully accepted my proposal, and we began planning our future together. Jane was nothing more than a distant memory, a chapter long closed. My story was not one of heartbreak. It was one of triumph. I had risen from the ashes of betrayal, and I had never been happier.